So just a few announcements before we get started. We do have a big program tonight. Pardon? Yeah, you can hit the lights. Thank you, Randy. We are actually, there's a personal field trip in play now. It started on April 1st, no joke. Goes through the end of June at Durham's Museum of Life and Science. I think it used to be, Hugh mentioned in the newsletter, that used to be the place to go for the butterfly house. I think that's still there, right? That's part of it. But they have a lot more. They have all kind of, it reminds me of like maybe even a bigger version of the Greensboro Science Museum, perhaps. Things for the kiddies, wildlife. If you check out the website, if you're not familiar with it, I just did a couple pictures here. So yeah, do you know what the cost is to get in, Hugh?
$2. I think seniors are $1 less.
Okay, so $22 to get in. But yeah, so head out there while the weather's good and grab you some shots, and Hugh will be sending out a link soon to share your top 5 pictures for that. And that's anytime you want during this time. All right, Alamance Arts Affiliate Exhibit Space. So you may or may not be familiar with this, but we are under the Alamance Arts in Graham. Under we're one of their affiliates. We're affiliated with them, right? They have a place in their Captain White House, small space to exhibit pictures, and you can even sell them there. We've done that in the past. We had to take them down for a time period. Now they're open back up for those. So if you are interested, it's free. See Reese. Is Reese in the room? She's up front. You saw her up front getting your name tag from her. Or you can email here, apcmembers2@gmail.com, and just say you want to join the rotation. I think we can hold maybe 3, 4, 5 pictures, depending on the size. But she's taking pictures now. I don't think she has any now. So if you have pictures around the house, which I think most of us do, that you're interested in exhibiting, for sale is optional. You can do not for sale, but if you want to sell them, feel free to put a price on it and contact Reese. All right. Wanted, definitely alive. And I didn't make this up. I found this. I thought it was perfect. We want somebody that's alive to be our club secretary. So we're looking again for a club secretary. Huge reward, a year of learning and fun. So contact me, see me after the meeting. There's my phone number, or you can email alamancephoto@gmail.com to learn more about that. It's basically just attending board meetings. Not boring meetings, board meetings. And we don't even have those every month. So it'd be less than a couple hours a month, depending on when we have meetings. All right, tonight's program is Liquid, the photo show on liquid photos, presented and critiqued by Fran DeRespinis. I'm gonna let David introduce him. Just a quick note, he's on the Zoom. We have 49 pictures. Is that right, David?
Yes, we do.
At 49 pictures, so great turnout. Thank you guys for submitting your photos. But because we have such a large selection, he might be a little quick on going through each one, but I think you'll appreciate what he's going to show you tonight. It's going to critique them and maybe even show you a few things that you could have done differently. And hopefully we might have time at the end for a Q&A or just to discuss them. But David, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay. Frank is our presenter this evening. Frank is our center judge, and he's a photographer whose journey began with a Kodak Instamatic and a Polaroid land camera in his hands, and as a young boy. That early spark grew into a lifelong pursuit of seeing and helping us see the world more clearly. In college, he photographed campus politics and life on the streets. Later, as a high school teacher in New York's Hudson Valley, he spent weekends walking the streets of Manhattan, capturing both the vibrancy of human activity and the quiet poetry of architectural spaces. Transformal training at the School of Visual Arts in New York City and the Center for Photography at Woodstock deepened his craft and connected him with the influences that shaped his vision. He has judged for our club before, and we're delighted to welcome him back. Now based in Raleigh, he continues to chart his own visual course. In a world where everyone carries a camera, he remains committed to a unique way of seeing, searching for the odd, the quirky, and the quietly beautiful moments of everyday life. While he occasionally turns his lens toward nature, he stays true to his street-born instincts, creating primarily black and white images and exploring color only when the image demands it. His work has been exhibited across the Hudson Valley, Providence, Vienna, Key West, Brooklyn, Kokomo, and throughout the North Carolina Triangle region. And his photographs reside in private collections from Miami, Brooklyn to Vienna. Frank, it's all yours.
Great. Can you see me? Can you see me there on
Yes.
Zoom?
Yeah.
Okay, great. I'm ready to go with my presentation, but before I start, let me just thank you all for inviting me. I appreciate it, and I must also admit that I'd much rather be there in person, but circumstances made that difficult tonight. I do have to admit I'm going to have to move fast. With 49 images, I like to talk a lot, but luckily what I've done is, as I did last time, I've got text on the screen so that at the end of this, I'll be able to make a PDF file of this presentation. And I guess I'll have to put it in your Dropbox, but I can be in touch with Keith or someone about that, so that if you want to look at it and review it to remember, it'll be easier. The other thing is, if your image comes up, there'll be a page number. So if we have time for questions, you can reference that page number if we have time to go back to it. We may not tonight, but just to let you know. Okay? So shall I share my screen?
Go ahead. Yep, you're on.
Let's see if we can get this allow to share. This is a new thing for me. Allow to share window, allow to share screen. I'm going to go for screen. And I don't know, what do you see right now? What do you see?
Right now, we still see you.
Ooh, what did
Not
I do
sharing.
wrong?
You share content, maybe?
Well, now if I click share, it doesn't say. Oh, wait a minute. I see it up in the corner. They always change the interview. Okay, so am I there now? Select window for sharing. Let's see. Is
Here we
it
go.
there?
Yeah, we see it.
Oh, good. Okay. Well, let me start it then. And please interrupt me if something happens that shouldn't happen, but I think we're set to go. Everyone see that?
Yes, sir.
All right, good. Alamance Photography Club Liquid, here we go. So, I want to thank you again for inviting me. It's a pleasure. I always like looking at other people's photographs. I learn a lot. I hope you get something out of this too. First thing is, you should know that your image is fine as it is. It's perfect as it is. We're looking at a competition though. So we look at standards, rules, and guidelines to see if you can, forgive me for saying this, fit into a box. And that box is, I want to make my picture so other people can appreciate it. Sometimes I love my image, but other people may not, for a variety of reasons. And it could have something to do with artistic guidelines or standards. So we use some of those whenever we have a competition. I don't know your intention. So when I tell you something I like or don't quite like, and you disagree, you're the one that's right. But still, there are things you might be able to pick up. See, all I see is the result, not the effort you put into your photograph. It's the result that is judged. And as you already know, on any given day, I or any other judge could change their minds. So another judge could come in and they could pick a different picture as one of the honorable mentions, or they might give a little bit different type of critique. So there will be times when I'll be very picky. I'll see a small thing and tell you about a tiny little thing, and you'll disagree. Or you might say, I didn't see that before. Good idea. So please, a grain of salt. One general observation: a theme can be a blessing, but it can also be a curse. You might see the theme, but lose sight of everything else that's needed to make a photograph that works. And that's certainly the case with some of the images I'm going to show. So here's how the process goes. I'm going to show each image one at a time. And after I show that individual image, I'm going to show it again with the written commentary on the screen, and also maybe an alternative version. Then we'll show the three honorables. We'll announce them and display them. Then I'll show the three, I call them notables. The third, second, and first places will be displayed. And if time allows, we'll have some discussion. So, oh, yes, I said alternative. Alternative doesn't necessarily mean better. Remember, it's your photograph. You may like it just the way it is. So here's an example of what I'm going to do. You'll see your picture. Then I'll show it again with some good words around it, I hope. And then if I'm making a recommendation for an alternate version, I'll show it to you. Quickly, in this case, I just remove that little spot. I hate to do that kind of thing, but sometimes it's nice. And I also darken this one light area, a nit, but I also reversed it because in Western society, we read from left to right. So very often, the energy going from left to right is something that critics and judges look for. Not always. And then I'll show it so you can see the two versions. So let's get started. Your turn. Image number one. Now, let me tell you what works. I really like the framing of the child, obviously, between the two water streams, and the effect of the water on the child. I think the shutter speed, exposure, and depth of field work really well here for this story. And of course, the child's gesture is terrific. What could be stronger? I really don't have an alternate image other than one little thing, and that is maybe to put a vignette. I always recommend a slight vignette on a photograph. Enough that it makes a difference to have the viewer go into the picture, but not be an obvious vignette unless their purpose. Yeah, that's your purpose. So here's the original, and I don't know what you see on your screen because I don't know what technology you're looking at, but there it is with a slight vignette. It's not large, but it can make a difference of drawing the eye to the center. Here's the second one. Totally different take on liquid. What works? I love the idea of the beer as the liquid. I like it being in the center, kind of portrait-like, right? And I really appreciate the color palette and the use of the texture. I don't know if that's a texture that's from, I assume it's a software texture in a software program. Could be anything, of course. Now, what could be stronger is the attempt to, and I'm not sure there was an attempt, but if there's an attempt here to cover or minimize the person in the background, it isn't quite successful. I find it distracting. I find it distracting because it's part of the texture. So there's not a sense of reality there. So by looking at this really nice liquid in the glass, but then seeing that texture back there, I'm jumping back and forth. So I'm not landing on the subject. So what you might consider is minimizing the background distraction by darkening it, maybe cropping it to remove or minimize the hand, the fingers, the arm. And that's what I did. So I'll show it to you larger now. And here it is with my changes. Again, you may prefer this. It may be important for you to have that person there. But here is an alternate way of looking at it. Great sense of liquid, by the way. Here's our third image. Might be our only black and white. Here's what works. I like it as a black and white. And I like the capture of the multiple fountains and the waterfall in the front. There's a randomness here against the structure. Of course, the architectural structure in the background. So it's a nice blend of the random and the structured. Unfortunately, the highlights are blown. And we're missing the top of the building and the top of the highest fountain bloom. They become distracting. There's a relatively low contrast here too. When you're exposing, be careful. Depending upon your camera, and most modern cameras will do this, our cameras are better than us anyway, expose for the highlights. It's usually a lot easier to bring out shadows and guard your highlights in the exposure than it is to try to downplay the highlights because you'll just go gray. In fact, if you take a look at what I did here, and again, I'll show it you larger, I did try to downplay the highlights here, But you can see that what happens is it goes, if you can see it, tends to go gray. Here's the original. Here's what I did. Actually, I didn't change that much. What I did was I put more contrast here. But I really can't control that because that becomes gray instead of detail. So expose for your highlights when you can. This is interesting. I really like this image. I'm especially taken by the branches, although it is about liquid. Well composed, well exposed. There's a sense of mystery for me, and it's made more mysterious, obviously, by the spider webs. The larger spider web and the branches on the right create a really nice balance in the image. And I think the sky tone is appropriate. What I mean by that is so many people shoot the sky and by processing or whatever, they turn it to cyan. Be careful of that. Sky is not as cyan as a lot of photographers create. What could be stronger? Well, spiderwebs often have dew on them, and I know that's why this image is here. But unfortunately, being as small as it is, it was hard for me to recognize the dew in this image, and it's about liquid. What would I do to this image? Well, I don't know about you, but I'd make this black and white for drama and mystery. Look at the difference. You, again, might prefer your color, but it takes on a whole different life in black and white. And depending on the software you have, you might be able to, for instance, in Lightroom, I work mostly in Lightroom. In Lightroom, if you turn this, if this is a raw file and you turned it into black and white, you could then use the sliders and, for instance, take that blue sky and make it quite dark because you can still control your RGB, your red, green, and blue. So you might consider going from this to something like this. Experiment. A nice landscape, a good landscape. It's a common capture, a still body of water with vegetation on the banks, and you recede into the background. I think the fog works really well here, as does the reflection, and it's exposed extremely well. I also like being led to the right side of the image in the background rather than what most people do is straight down the middle. This is a nice balance going off to the right. However, that strong vertical of trees on the left, by the way, can you see my cursor?
Yes.
Okay. You see that strong foliage here? Every time I look at it, I get stuck over there. I want to go back here, but I keep going here because it's so pronounced. It's so heavy. It's almost like you could turn the picture to the left, and this would be the bottom, and this would be the top. So I'm getting lost over there. It takes my attention away from the landscape and the reflective mood. So what I recommend you do is crop this if you want to focus on the liquid, on the water. You could also add texture down here, which I did a little bit of. And so if we go from this to this, from this to this. Again, you may prefer this, but look how heavy that is. I get stuck. Maybe you don't. I think this works better for the lake and the water. This is another interesting with a natural sense of the water. What works for me is it's an interesting waterfall because it's got that mass of jammed trees showing the power of the water, the effect of the water. Usually photographers only want to show the beauty of a waterfall, but this effectively demonstrates the effect of the liquid or the water in nature. It helps to create a more unique capture. But I think in this composition, the waterfall and the trees are not the dominant subject, and it's not enough to maintain the viewer's interest. So I suggest you do something different here. I suggest you go horizontal. For this subject and this theme, I think this horizontal image tends to emphasize the power and the drama in the story. So we go from this to this. Now, it might be too much of a crop for you, but the next time you're out shooting something like this, shoot it vertical and horizontal. All of this over here, it frames beautifully, but it's out of focus. And this is far away. When I see this, I really, really get that mood and that tension from all that jammed up um, uh, vegetation and the trees trying to get over the waterfall and camp. Texture. This is an interesting use of texture to frame the subject glasses and liquid. The color is beautiful. I like the reflections, those reflections up there and in here. I like the implied shaking or movement. As I look at it, I don't know why, but I get this feeling of movement on those glasses on the sides. I don't know if that was intentional or not, but I personally sense it. What could be stronger is that I think the amount of textured framing is a bit too dominant because remember, this particular competition is about the liquid. So I think it competes with the subject. I'd like to see more emphasis on the glass and the wine. So cropping out some of that texture still leaves you plenty of texture, and you could use dehaze if you have that in your software and post processing, or add texture to the glass surfaces. So we go from this to this. I'll go back from this, which is really good. But with this, now the emphasis is more on the liquid in the glasses. Yet you still have plenty of that texture. You might crop it a little differently. You might crop less than I did. An interesting abstract. I like the abstracted liquid. I like the contrast of the upper and lower parts. They really provide a lot of interest to me. And I appreciate that the two parts are not equal in size. You know, dark elements tend to be heavier. So if this were the larger piece, I think it would be out of balance. Because the lighter piece is a little bit bigger, and maybe the intention was to make them 50-50, but they're not. This being a little bit bigger, I think they balance pretty well. I also like the fact that the dark is on top of the light. Sometimes people would reverse that because they think this heavy piece should be below. I'm not sure that would work here. The bubbling liquid on the bottom and swirling water in the top give me a sense of mystery. And I love that red leaf that's more in focus than anything else. I think, however, the overall tone and texture is a bit flat, so you need to play with it. You can add more texture, clarity, saturation to deepen that mood. You might also consider darkening the bright part of the bottom, and that's that little piece right here. Again, might be fine just the way it is, but I tried to integrate it better here. So we go from this to this. Now, you might look at first at the overall picture to see how I did improve clarity, texture, and that almost gives it a little bit of sharpness, but it's still obviously an abstraction that's a purposeful blur. And then you might take a look in that piece right here and how it's better integrated. I might have gone a little too far, but I don't think so. I think that works well. Again, you might prefer it this way. This is an alternative. This is great. It's a great capture. The perspective is strong and the balance is effective. I love the curvature of the right side of the pool and how it mimics a curvature over here. And then on top of that, you've got curves here. You've got these circles and these curves. And then you've even got these curves of all the umbrellas. So you really get all these really cool curvy shapes. And people sometimes just see them unconsciously. But if you really look closely, you've got terrific curves here. Very effective. Now, what could be stronger is just this one area here. It's fine as it is, but bright spots tend to draw our attention, and some viewers might get stuck up here. They might go from here, wind up here, and not leave, or go out of the picture. So all I'd recommend is don't blow your highlights. If you've got information there, and this one does, go from here to here. It's still very light and contrasty, and it's got great speckles, that specular highlights. But here it's rather blown. Here You're picking up the information that is in the picture. I didn't add it. I just pulled it out. I did something dramatic with this one. I really like the abstracted liquid that reaches up to the top of the frame, almost like a bird taking flight. In fact, I hate to say this, but in this abstraction, I do see a bird. It could be a challenge to balance an abstracted image like this, but this one works. I think it's balanced very well. The black background also feels like a star-filled space rather than ground or water, which it probably is. And I can't really tell if this is ice or not, but there's a transparency and a stillness of ice despite that upward movement. So that's a really nice composition. What could be stronger for this competition is that the color, to me, does not convey liquid. The actual subject does, but not the color. You might consider doing something like this. You might not like it, but you could experiment. See if this tonality works better for you or this tonality, especially for a competition like this. When we think of ice, we think of blue. We don't think of this color, but they both work. Neither one is right or wrong. That's up to you. Here's a totally different image. I'm fascinated by this image. It's unique in more than one way for me, but especially in the way it displays the effects of liquid in the natural world. How these stalagmites and stalactites, right? How they're created. I love the unearthly, mysterious sense of place and how the photographer chose a depth of field that yields sharpness all the way from the foreground to the very background deep in there. I don't have a sense of scale. I don't know. This could be 3 feet wide or it could be 200 feet wide. I don't know and I don't care because it's got this great depth of field that really works. Now, to my eyes, the detail across the image is so good that it makes it difficult for me to feel the depth of the image. I think if I saw it in paper, if it were a large print on a wall, I'd have a better sense of that depth. But for me to see it online, I darkened the top and the bottom, which caused me as the viewer to look towards the middle. Now, sure, you lose detail here, but now, even though there's great details here, I think it's less flat. I think I'm drawn more towards the middle again. It's amazing what a vignette can do for you, or darkening using, let's say, a linear gradient or something else that allow you to darken parts of the image. So you might prefer this because you want to see all the detail, or you might prefer this to bring you from the mystery of the outside to the interior. Here's a good one. And the reason I like it, because it's fun. We encounter it every day when we turn on our water. Photographing the ordinary or the mundane. It can be interesting and it can be very effective. I like the contrast here of the liquid with the hardness of the faucet. You know, it's like a brass, dark brass or copper kind of color. Those colors work great for me. It maintains a certain amount of ordinariness of the day, but I think it can be stronger. I think a sense of balance is missing. There's not the same amount of information on either side. It's not quite straight. I think it needs more contrast, more texture, and by being cropped, all those things can contribute to the quality of the liquid. So we go from here to here. From here to here. But of course, you need post-processing. You'd have to have something that would allow you to do this. I love the triplet. Threes always work. And there's a lot to see here. There's a vibrant sense of life. There's decay, the life process itself. And I love these squiggly lines here. These shapes are fantastic over here. It's nicely balanced within the frame. I think the composition works well. How could it be stronger? This is a matter of taste. I think the weakness is in the exposure and the flatness of the tones. So you might consider darkening the image and, if you care to do so, change the color temperature of the water. So you go from this to this. Again, this might be your preference. Softer, muted colors, almost pastel, or you might like a little more drama, detail, texture, and color change. Love that droplet there. Absolutely love that droplet there. Both of them. Compositions like this are sometimes jokingly called Pollocks, which can be unfair to the photographer and to Jackson Pollock himself. You know, I'll pick a random thing and I'll make it look good. Pollock didn't do that, and I don't think this photographer did either. But this probably was experimentation. These type of abstractions are not easy to do, but this one seems to work for me. I like the dominant, wider white lines or stripes, these. And they're against a kind of busy, extravagant black and white background. So I assume the liquidity of the image, and it's interpretive because I don't really see water here. I don't see any liquid here. But knowing the theme, I think the liquidity is in the implied interpretation. But because it's got some interesting color in there, personally, I think this image would look even better if the color weren't as faint and the highlights weren't blown. That's a no-go for me. So what would I do? I'd give it more strength to the color by increasing texture, vibrance, saturation, but you can also benefit from a crop to eliminate a lot of that blown out white sense. Now, you may prefer that. You might like this, and then you're done. But you can also go to this. Whoops, sorry about that. One more time. You can go to this. From this to this. There's a lot of color in there. I didn't add color. All I did was bring out what was already in that JPEG. Now, this one. This is interesting. This landscape is really about line, form, and pattern more than the natural landscape for me. The interest lies in the competing areas of like a lava-like liquid and the burnt landscape. It maintains my attention. I really like the contrast and the diagonal movement from left to right. Actually, almost gives you two triangles. Not quite, but you're almost there. How could it be stronger? Be careful of your exposure to avoid blown highlights. Again, expose for the highlights, try to bring up the shadows. That's tough to do when you're doing a long exposure, I know. But it's a good idea because people get lost in blown highlights unless they're really effectively used. So when you take shots like this, you might want to bracket so that you have 4, 5, 6, 8, 10 pictures, and then you can look at them and either go in and blend them together or find the one that might be able to draw out shadows by maintaining more detail. Now, I couldn't bring out a lot of detail because the highlights are blown. But if you look at what I did, I softened it. I actually reduced contrast. And by doing that, I made it more ethereal. You might prefer the more dramatic, higher contrast, but you may also experiment with this idea of ethereality, where if you take a look, for instance, here, it's definitely different in some of these areas as a result of reducing the contrast and texture here. Just an alternative. I'm drawn to the mood of this early morning, or maybe it's an early evening or late evening capture. The effect of the light on the ice, and I'm not sure it's ice, that might be foam on the shoreline. That's what makes the image. The warm tones are seductive. The exposure and processing complement the mood. What could be stronger? It's difficult for me to determine where the subject is. Yeah, this is the subject, but it's also a competition about liquid. So is this the subject or is this the subject? So one way you can fix that if you want to is if the allure is in the light on the open water versus the light on this ice or foam. You could do it with a crop so that you still maintain plenty of this, but now you go from this to this. Much more emphasis here with all the light dancing on the tops of the form. From this to this. Again, it's a matter of choice and what you want to emphasize. I call this the honeycomb, although it's not. I like it as a macro shot. Its strength is less the composition and more the color and the varied shapes that are all within the frame here, with the bubbles of water are producing. I don't really know what it is, but it's the color and the varied shapes that make it for me. I do think, though, there's a lack of vibrance or contrast in the image, which reduces the strength of the subject itself. Again, the intention may have been to keep it very soft and pastel-like. If you're happy with it, keep it. But you could do this to it. You could add and strengthen the vibrance and contrast, and I did a number of things. I dropped the blacks and the highlights, but I added to the shadows and whites. You play with it a little bit. You experiment. See what you like. I also think maybe a slight vignette would work. So you could go from this to this. Again, this is a choice. This is a preference. This is how you decide you prefer to see. And it might be something in between. This is another strong macro. This one's quite compelling. It doesn't reveal its liquidity. So I need to know the theme. I need to know the theme. Yeah.
The photo hasn't changed on the share.
Oh. Do you see the image here?
It's the last one that you commented on.
So are you seeing the honeycomb water?
Yeah, the honeycomb. Yep.
I don't know why, because it's moving. What do I need to do? Mine is changing.
There we go. You did it.
Okay, so I went out of the. So where are we now? What do you see?
Abstract of colorful balloons.
Do you see it now?
Yes.
Good. Okie doke. Thanks. I appreciate that. So here's this image, and it's obviously in the competition about liquid, right? But it's compelling. It doesn't reveal its liquidity right away. So I need to know the theme to know what this substance is. But not knowing it, I have to admit, it makes it a great abstraction. So how can I make it stronger? Well, I really can't. It's good just the way it is. However, I always say explore. Do this. Turn it. Now, maybe the photographer did turn it already. Maybe the photographer has turned it even horizontally. But play with your images. Turn them upside down. Reverse them. Go horizontal versus vertical when it's something abstract like this. I'm not sure which I prefer. I tried it horizontally also. That works as well. This is totally different. Where we had ultra sharpness in the other one, we have a lack of it here. Have to admit, I tend to shun photos of flowers because you see so many of them. We're bombarded by them. But this macro is not a trite, overused vision. I like the selective focus. I like the twisting of shapes of the flower. And the framing works, and the color is just splendid. If you take time to look around those twisted petals, the droplets of water are really quite interesting. But as good as it is and as much as I like it, I'd like to see a little bit more attention to this where the droplets are. And you can do that easily. You can add a vignette so that you're not drawn to the edges, but you can also darken the center so that you bring out the detail even though it's not in focus. And now what you've created is a valley so that you get more of that ridge to look at. I think it makes it a stronger composition. So you go from this to this to this. And it was simply a matter of darkening the center and darkening the outside, in this case with a vignette. I didn't quite know what to make of this because I don't know where this is or what this is, but it's a pretty phenomenal location. It's excellent exposure. I feel the power of the subject. I do find the bottom left corner distracting, but this is me because I wasn't quite sure what it was. Was it a multiple exposure? And it's a little light in its tonality. So I didn't know if it was movement or part of the post-processing. So the only thing that I saw for my taste was to darken this. But again, that may be wrong for the photographer. But I saw this as a distraction because I saw detail that made it difficult for me to understand why it looked that way. And that's a distraction to the viewer. So I went from this. Do you see what I mean by those multiple views there? I really can't figure that out. But I thought it was a little bit better by darkening it. Again, your choice, your photograph. Otherwise, it's a spectacular capture of a very powerful moment. And then we go to a macro again. Water on a leaf, a very common subject, but shooting the back of it, and it's imperfect at that, is intriguing. Imperfection is good, by the way. Wabi-sabi, as the Japanese say. The variation of the leaf in the pooled water gives strength and balance to this image. And the textured background and background color blend really nicely with the green. Here's what I would think would make it stronger, though. I find that line distracting. Now, that may be intentional. And it's if intentional, you're done. But I'm drawn over there and I wonder, why is that line there? Why am I seeing a line? That takes the viewer, in my case, out of the photo. It's also true that this really nice frame here is not here. So if you want it, you can easily do it by removing the line, if you're able to do it in your software, or maybe by what texture you choose, or how close in you get. And then you can create a similar vignette quality on the left, but you might have to do it with, by painting it rather than a vignette, because you don't want a vignette this side, it's already there. So if it's your style and taste, it can go from this to this. This is more formal, but it certainly is more balanced. I didn't change anything about the subject, just that part over there. Oops. Love the water droplets on the back. And this is my favorite part right here. I love it. Okay, another leaf, but different, totally different. That's the beauty of photography and macro photography. By the way, this picture is probably much sharper than you're seeing on the screen. Some of the images that came to me were smaller than others. So what works is it's very nicely composed. It's very balanced. It's a simple representation of how liquid works with the detail inside the droplet. I love the curvature. All these curvatures, they're beautiful, of the leaves and the shadows. The piece of leaf in the upper left and the stem, or really is part of another leaf, but I see this here, it's not a stem. They provide a very nice, strong, but unusual diagonal. So you're dividing the picture here very nicely, maybe without realizing it. This is a nit. I think perhaps there could be more depth in the droplet. Now, I see it as two different ways. You might prefer it lighter because your eye gets drawn to the light, or you might prefer the more dramatic so that you see more dark space mimicking the outer space and more detail in the lighter areas. Again, this is a choice. This is a personal preference. Very different. We now have a human being interacting with the water. Story in this image really grabbed my attention. The water from the fountain, because of the depth of field that the photographer has and the slow shutter speed, emphasizes the great depth from foreground to background. Intentionally done or not, the people are obscured not by what we all call bokeh, not by having a wide open aperture, which is so common today to put everything out of focus, but instead it's by the water, which is fantastic because the water is what we're talking about, the liquid. But these people get obscured by the water rather than the focus. I really like that. And of course, the boy's stance, his gesture is perfect for the reaction to the water. The balance is strong and the exposure is spot on. It's exposed and avoids the blown highlights. I like that. But I think the bottom lacks some anchoring. So all I recommend is that you darken the bottom a little bit and, as usual, put a tiny vignette to draw people to the center. It's fine as it is, but look at the difference.
Amazing.
I'm not drawn over there at all anymore. And look, I've got all that detail in the water. It looks blown out, but there's detail there. That means the exposure was done well. Had I tried this with a blown out white, I would have just gotten a sloppy gray. So well done. And you see how they're sharp, but they're obscured by the water. That's a little distracting, but we can let that go. That's reality. That could be darkened or removed, though, but it doesn't get in my way because this is so dominant. Because we go for the eyes and we go for the brightness. Back to nature. Great color, great curving leading line, bringing the viewer to the pool of water, of liquid, towards the top of the frame. I love the three stones. Three always works. Nice little triangle there. Texture works real well, as does the depth of field. Now, what could be stronger, and this again is a preference, this is a style thing. When I look back here, I can still go farther, and I can get up here and get stuck. But if I crop it so that the viewer takes the pathway and then hits the water or liquid and stays there because there's less of that top to move into. So we can go from this to this. Not very different, just removing some of the top. And you're a little closer now, so you see that triangle, and then I think the viewer stops here nicer now. This is a great line. Beautiful landscape. Well composed, beautiful, effective fore, mid, and background. I love the juxtaposition of the man-made stone bridge with nature. And I love the triangles. Do you see all the triangles? Here's one. Here's one. Here's one. Here's another one. Triangles are terrific. Usually we pick them up unintentionally, but this one works real well. So we want to go here with this water because it's about liquid. And it takes us all the way back here. But instead of me going back to the mountains here, I take a little detour and I see all this sunlight. Now, you might like it this way. If you love it this way, keep it. But for the sake of this competition, I would have toned it down. Now, maybe in this particular version, I toned it down maybe a tad too much, but I think it's in line with the rest of the sunlit areas that we see here. And I'm not drawn to it. I don't get stuck over there. I don't think about it. I don't become analytical because I'm not going there. I'm going here and maybe all the way back here. Foreground, midground, background, but I don't get stuck here. I realize that maybe be reality, But remember, a photograph is not real. A photograph is a photograph. You make it what you want. There's a critter using the water. I like the bird's movement, providing a very natural moment. The focus and the shutter speed combination, I think, capture this action appropriately because it's very sharp. But obviously, with the slow to shutter speed and the bird shaking, we've got motion. And the placement in the frame helps the balance of the overall image. It's a bit overexposed, though. The only thing I really think can help this image, let's darken it. You can darken it by darkening the entire image, or if you have the tool, do a linear gradient up from this corner up this way. In this particular case, I darkened the entire image. So I went from here to here. Same image, but it's got plenty of detail there and richness if you just darken it a little bit. So I think it's just a little overexposed and can be changed. This is interesting, isn't it? What I like is I love the perspective because it gives the viewer the sense of being under both the water and the subject. The gesture of the hand and the leg, they emphasize human action, but they also create a nice sense of space within the photo. There's a great space here. And then you've got all that, I'm going to call it negative space, but it's divided with almost a diagonal going across, interrupted by these two elements here, the hand and the starfish. It's a great story and an effective abstracted view of reality. Now, this is very personal. I like the composition, but I think it being horizontal doesn't emphasize the drama of the subject in the water. I also think the tonality is a little bit thin. That's how I would view it. Now, the photographer may prefer this. Stay with it if you like it better. But for me, I think the negative space displays better. I think the diagonal shows more strongly. And I punched it up a little bit to bring out more contrast in all of the elements. I actually did it a lot more than this and liked it, but I thought I'd tone it down. And this was halfway there and looks good. I love it. You might prefer this, or this might work for you. So it goes from this to this. This to this. Personal choice. Another bird shaking its head. I like the way it meets the requirements of the theme. As the bird shakes its neck and head, the water droplets fly off in a circular manner. I love how you can see that circle of droplets. The bird itself is almost like a Loch Ness monster to me. Sorry, I love horror movies. I love monster movies when they're good. That's what I see. But I come back to the reality of the bird. The placement of the bird in the square frame and the square aspect ratio really work well for me. Both the shadow here and the movement of the water on the back of the bird give a really nice balance in addition to the effects of the liquid. However, I found the rendition a little flat. And then there's this thing about gray water, and it's been in some of the other pictures too, one of which I changed. I think it would be enhanced by brightening the image in some way, increase the texture a little, maybe the contrast, so that you go from here, maybe it was a very cloudy day, to here. It's not changing it that much, but you're bringing out a little bit more of the color in the bird, and you're certainly bringing up detail and interest, I think, in all the water. So it's just a matter of brightening it up a bit. Interesting subject. I love the illumination. I like the direction of light. I like the source of light. I like the detail of the light. And it's about liquid. So it's used effectively in an unusual way. I love the curvature of the item below the vessel here. This is great because it mimics the shape of this illuminated glass. I'm not sure what that is. A bottle, a glass, something that diffuses like a perfume or something. I don't know. But the illumination's great. The reflection's great, and I love that curve. I'm not sure it's any better, but to my eyes, the composition could benefit by bringing more of that reflected object below the glass. So it's not a huge change, but I think you can see that I bring out some more detail here and all along. And I think it contributes to this whole shape against the negative space. So you go from here to here, from here to here.
By the way, that's liquid soap
Oh, liquid soap. That's
with
great. I should have
with a
realized
LED
that.
light behind it. Yeah.
Nice, nice. Wonderful source of light. Wonderful source of light. Okay, folks. I know for a fact this was done on purpose, wasn't it? Nobody walks by this and just accidentally takes a picture like this. I'm an urban photographer. And so this type of image appeals to me on a number of different levels. The framing is great. You know, some people say, oh, you got to get those buildings out of there. You've chopped them in half. No, you don't. They look just perfect the way they are. We know there's more building there, but we don't need it. It's balanced effectively. The urban elements work together well. And it's a really nice exposure. Again, good sky. The depth of field is perfect. You want all of this to be in focus, but you also want all of this to be in focus. So don't do that bokeh thing. I got to have an f1.4 lens because everything's got to be out of focus except my subject. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. As good as it is, though, I think this would be a great black and white image to create drama and depth. Now, your mileage may vary, but this image to me is black and white. Look what it does to the sky. Now, admittedly, it's a small JPEG that was sent, that I had to use. So you got some noise, but don't be afraid of noise either if the noise looks good. But you go from here, which is lovely. I like it. But you go to here, which is dramatic. It's a story. And look how these shapes change. Look at all of these shapes when you go from here to here. Do I lose the whoops, I'm sorry. Do I lose the beauty of that water? Yes. But you're going for something else when you go for black and white. You're going from something that is already an abstraction. Photography is an abstraction. But then you double down on the abstraction by going black and white. And now to this next one. This one's tough for me. I like the composition and the interpretation of the theme. I'm drawn to this liquid because it's gelatinous. It's sticky. I can almost feel it being sticky on my fingers. I almost wrote that I can almost taste it, but I don't know what it is, so I don't want to put it in my mouth. But can't you feel that? Can't you feel that stickiness? I like the white orbs up here. These are great. Again, watch out for the person that says, oh, you got to remove those. They're a distraction. Well, very often, little white specks on the edge are an abstraction. But in this one, there's a repetition that I think works real well. And then there's more of them down here. So that was work for me. Now, can it be stronger? I can't really improve much on this particular image unless I want to punch it up to increase what I felt, which was the stickiness. So they're not very different. But if you do want to do it, it's a simple matter of changing vibrance, saturation, contrast. And it's really a preference thing. Maybe the photographer already did it. When you compare them, the original looks a little flat. But if you don't see this one, you wouldn't know it. It's like TVs. Your color looks fine. You go to your friend's house, their color looks fine because the TVs aren't next to each other. If they were next to each other, you might see the differences much more easily. But I like this one for me. Whoops, sorry about that. I like this one. Whoops, here we go. I prefer this darker one only because of that feeling I get from this picture. It's got to be your feeling. You decide what you feel and represent that in your image. Okay. Gorgeous color. The subject is enticing, and this diagonal is engaging. Look at that. You got two beautiful triangles. And there's meaningful repetition of form in the theme of those bubbles of water. So what's not to love in this picture? Just two tiny things. You see that little guy right there? I hate him. You don't have to take it out. You don't have to take it out, but I really, really would. If it were my photo, I'd remove that. I generally don't take things out when they aren't. They have to be a real distraction for me because it's on the edge. Remember, I'm putting a white frame here because it's on the edge. With or without that white frame, that distracts me. Okay. We did one other thing, which I think is again totally subjective. I went in there and I put radial darkening here just to put more emphasis on it. I don't think it's necessary, but you can see what I do here and there when I change it. From here to here. You might just want to move that little guy out. This one's okay because it goes down along here. But this is a delightful image. This one's harder for me. I got stuck. The liquid is interesting, but it's a conundrum. See, if it's ice, it works. It looks like ice. But there's also droplets of water. So that means the liquid is flowing. So the way the capture was made, freezing the motion, gives me the sense of the ice. But it's inscrutable because I'm not sure it's ice or flowing water. Maybe it's both and I'm missing something. So for this kind of thing, I'm not sure the shutter speed was right if it's supposed to be flowing water. The composition could be stronger. I don't know what this is. Is it a fountain? It's hard to see what it really is. And there's an offending light line here. So all I did was remove the line. I did darken this just slightly. But the truth is, what I would do is experiment by photographing this with different shutter speeds to see which one more effectively captures what that water really is. Is it ice? Is it flowing water? It really can't be both. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it should be both. See how I darken that and slightly darken this? Okay. A waterfall. But I'm glad I'm not in the room because whoever took this picture, if they're present, they may throw a shoe at me. I love the sense of place in this photograph. It conveys, a sense of power in that waterfall. It's dramatic. It's well composed. It's well exposed. But I'm confused. I've never seen a waterfall that's got so much color in it. I don't know if that's real or not. I don't know if it's dirt. I don't know if it's debris. I don't know if it was done in post-processing. That makes it a distraction for me, okay? However, it may be that I'm terribly misinformed and someone's going to say, no, that's real. Haven't you ever seen a waterfall like this? So I don't know if it's real or not. So my change may not be appropriate. You can throw raspberries at me. I made it more typical because my vision I couldn't get it. So I don't know if it's real. And I apologize if I did this and ruined it for you. But to me, this looks more like water. Yeah.
Fran, don't worry about it. You didn't ruin it for me. And I'm a former Brooklynite myself over here, so I won't throw any sticks or anything at you either. So no problems. But I will say
Is
that
this real? Is this real?
maybe not the colors are a little bit enhanced, but that's for sure. Just like I enhanced the colors for sure.
Okay. You enhanced them. So I went too far. But
Yeah.
this isn't
So-
exactly real. By the way, I want you to feel free to throw sticks at me because I'm not from Brooklyn. I'm from the Bronx.
Oh, that's worse. That's worse. That's worse, Fran.
I know that.
Yeah, but
Anyway, that's
to-
why.
yeah, but to be honest with you, when I see like it's all interpretation. Of course, you can talk to 100 people, you get like to me, I think that's a little bit washed out.
Yeah, exactly. I
Right.
purposely went too far to make the dramatic difference. But again, Look, you guys asked me to be a judge, but to be
Sure.
honest with you, I'm going to say something that I didn't think I was going to say during the meeting. I'm retiring. This is my last judging. I've been doing it for
Really?
15 years. I've been critiquing, judging, whatever, giving people advice. There are a lot of us around, but I'm taking a break
Sure.
because I'm working on some serious projects. And so this is my last judging. So you can throw the rocks at me, but I am clear about the fact it's your image, it's your interpretation. So that's why I always call these alternatives. I'm not right. I'm just giving advice. Sometimes there are things maybe you should do, but then there are other times you shouldn't do. So thanks for
Yeah.
telling me all that. I'm glad you're at the meeting. Good, good. All right, we'll move on. So we've got another macro, and I really like the angle of view here and the depth of field for this photograph. The reflections and the droplets, they make the picture sing for me. I like the composition and, again, the exposure. All of our cameras can do good exposures if we know how to do it. I like the highlights, they're not blown. And this is a strong interpretation of the theme. Now, what could be stronger? Though it's well balanced, I think the flower petal here dominates too much. It draws my attention away from all this foreground and the liquid and brings me back here. It's imposing to me. So there's also this lighter tone here. It's not too bad. This is minimal. This is, to me, the offending distraction. So I'd recommend that you crop it. You still have plenty of this here, but now it's not as dominant. And now this bottom half is what I want to look at. So I go from here to here, and I still have it. I darken this just slightly, by the way, just slightly by cutting that out. Oh, I guess I did crop it a little too here. Yeah, see, I got rid of that whatever this green here that might be the reflection. But I think this makes a stronger, more compelling image of the various liquid drops. A geyser. Strong capture and good exposure for the subject. You're not blowing the highlights. I especially love that rainbow, which of course is the result of liquid and light. And it extends all the way up here. I like it. Image is powerful. It's apparent in here. Maybe, to my taste, a tighter composition. The photographer may prefer having all this context and therefore leave it as it is. But I'd say give it a shot and try a 4x3, lose a little of the bottom, and make this more dominant in the picture. It's a matter of preference. Do you want more of the geyser or do you want more of the context? Strictly a preference. Now I have to make a confession on this one. I also make my coffee with a Chemex, so I'm working real hard not to make that affect my judgment. It's perfect lighting here. I don't know if it's natural or studio lit. I see the light here and here, but it's very well done either way. Again, 3 works really nice. And I love the progression. Here we've got the coffee beans, we've got it liquefied, and we've got steam. That is something I really like. We've got liquid in 2 different forms, liquid and gas. Nobody else did that. I really like that. It works. One niggly is this little bit of a lighter area here. It's not washed out. It doesn't take me out of the picture. And it's a niggle, but it's a little bit light for my tastes, but it might be just fine for the photographer or anyone else. So all I did was give it a slight darkening through a vignette. That gave me a little more gravitas here and toned this down ever so slightly, but it's slight. It goes from here to here. My preference is the darker one, but if nobody ever saw that darker one, they might have never questioned it. But I really think this area looks a little better up here, and the base looks a little better being darker. More preference, more chocolate and vanilla. This one I'll fight for, though. I really like the flow of the water in this. You know, you take a chance when you're doing these longer exposures. You don't know how it's going to come out beforehand. You really, it's hard to pre-visualize exactly where the water's going to be. But in this long exposure, I love the feel of the water flowing here. It's well balanced. It's well framed with the foliage here, the rock. You've got the fence with the flowers. It's really nice. But what distracts me is the focus. This being soft and this being soft. I don't mind softness back here, but when I see the soft foreground like that, I kind of blink and wonder if there's something in my eye because I want to focus on that. I want to see it. But you can't see it because of the depth of field. But there is a way for me to minimize that. And that's by darkening the upper and lower framing to bring the viewer more into the waterfall. You can't really see it that well here, but you'll see it here. I didn't improve the focus here, but by darkening it, my eye is drawn now to the liquid, to the water, to this line here. Where here, I could just as easily get lost in these areas. So I think this does make a little stronger projection of the liquid. A rose by any other name. I hate roses. Not really. Not really. No, flowers shot like this can be trite. They can easily be dismissed. But what helps this one is this dominant droplet. Not the only one. There's a little bit of water, but this dominant droplet, it conjures up a story, maybe a metaphor for the viewer. Is that a tear? So, you know, there's something here that I think is a little bit more than a trite flower. The exposure, the texture, the color are beautiful. The composition is appropriate. How could you make it stronger? To my taste, I think there's too much of a distraction with all the leaves. We're not documenting the flower. We're trying to create an artful representation. To me, it might be a little bit less distracting if you minimize those surrounding leaves. And it can easily be done with a vignette or a brush. You go from this to this, from this to this, because it's not about the corners. It's not about the leaves. It's about the beauty of this flower and those drops of water from here to here. Simple things. I'll fight for this one too. Whoever saw this saw a really cool abstraction. And I don't know how much of it is post-processed, but because the limbs are not tremendously post-processed, it doesn't matter to me. I see the reality. Very interesting abstraction in nature. The colors and vibrations of the reflection are very strong. I like the rendition of the reflection and the attempt to frame it with all this vegetation and down here, the ground surrounding it. However, much of that framing is blown out. That becomes distracting, especially since it's at the edges of the image. So I did this. I did a serious, you could do a serious vignette or a crop or a little bit of both, because I did the crop, but I kept a little bit of that edgy vegetation. So it goes from this to this. It looks like I changed the interior of the picture. I didn't. All I did was crop and enhance a little bit with contrast. That's it. But boy, I'll tell you, I think this could go on a wall and I think this could be purchased. I wouldn't buy that because of all this blown out area. But that is intriguing. I can feel the cold. Looks like my neighborhood, actually. When I first looked at it, I thought it was my neighborhood. So I can feel it. It's well composed, well balanced. It's a very successful exposure. And it's so easy to blow these highlights, but they're not blown. And that curved road leads you nicely to the lone figure here. And that contributes to the scale. So both the figure and these trees here, they keep me along the path without throwing me out of the picture out here. I stay here nicely. I land, which is great. And of course, these are very imposing, large snow-covered trees that frame it beautifully. How would I make it stronger? Well, it's about the water. It's about the liquid. It's about the snow. I think there's a little too much sky. I'd crop it. I'd make it still horizontal, but instead of what looks like a 5x4 maybe, I'd make it a longer horizontal. So you go from this, which is lovely. Don't get me wrong. Whoops, you go from this to this. Now the drama and the focus is on all of this water down here, instead of it being kind of a competition with a very empty sky. Matter of taste, matter of emphasis. And then we have another abstraction. This is a very strong abstraction. The colors are very appealing. The composition works extremely well. I love the balance of the bands of orange. I call them tentacles as you move from the bottom to the top. It's kind of a random liquidity, and yet it's very structured in its appearance. To me, the image is just a bit soft, though. That's all I see is a little bit softness. Now, the photographer may want that softness, which is not pastel, but very soft gradations. Some people prefer the dramatic. So to my taste, I'd go there. And all it is punching it up, contrast, texture, maybe a little vignette. So you went from this to this. This is strictly a matter of taste because the image is there either way. We got to end by 8:30. I'm getting there. Very nice. I can feel myself floating in the water. Perfect placement of the starfish. The complementary colors work. But it's also true that this background becomes a second subject. This is a matter of taste. What would I do? I would darken the water. But that changes it dramatically. From that to this. This actually makes the water another subject, maybe more so than the original. But it's an opportunity to experiment with texture and color. Another mundane picture of the ordinary in life. The liquid water almost looks like it's creating a hole in here, which is very interesting. Not the strongest composition, but the subject is interesting. The grassy area here, though, is too light. It really distracts me. So I did a number of things here. I darkened that, but I also gave more contrast to what might be under shade to give this more emphasis. Go from here to here. Look at what it brought out here. Here to here. This image is really a lovely composition. I like the sense of place, the dominant fountain. I like the reeds that are here that give it more depth. My problem with it is I hate to use this word, but it's crunchy. And that may be the intention of the photographer. I really couldn't even fix it. It's so much like that. But this is the dominant water, and it works. But it also works if you soften everything else up. I soften the entire picture, and this is still very crunchy. So another way to look at it would be to make it more natural. The beauty will still be there. I see water dancing over rocks in this picture. Nice composition. I love the movement across the frame. It's got just enough context with the water's edge. Great control of whites. Well, good control of whites. The small blown out areas in the right is the only one really that bothers me a little bit. Can't really fix that, but consider it a vignette. I'll move along a little faster here. Consider the vignette, because with the vignette, you kind of change the tonality, making it a little more ethereal, but you can't really get rid of the blown out whites. The tough one. But I personally would give it that little bit of vignette. A macro of maybe oil or something else in the water. Nicely balanced macro shot. I love the brown and greens. The two in the bottom here anchor it beautifully. It doesn't lean to the right because of this anchor. The only thing that I might consider a change is what I see turning into a gray. And that gray, I think, is a little too gray for all the dramatic color that's here. You might just lighten it up. Lighten it up with a lighter vignette, reducing the vignette, rather using a linear gradient. And now for something very different.
That's good.
This is a very effective, controlled, maybe multiple strobe setup. Excellent capture of fluid dynamics and the specular highlights. The internal bubbles and pulp fragments are great. Maybe there's more light here. Maybe there's a back or side light to create this translucency in the fruit. It's crisp. Shutter speed's good. Short flash duration's great. Can't really change it. But since I'm the judge, I'm going to. The only thing you can do, if you want to, is to make it look a little more commercial. I love the dynamism of the angle here. It's a little bit off center. That would make it more commercial. Your choice. I just turned it a little, but you might prefer that. Okay. This is wild. This is one of those cluttered compositions that somehow works. It's amorphous and it's got structured aspects. The bubbles in the water, they really draw my attention. I like that formlessness. It's vibrant, saturated colors are dramatic. Square format works. But these edges here and here, they take me a little bit out of the picture. So I think I want a stronger interior. And again, simply done, a vignette or other way of darkening those edges. You go from there to this. Instead of taking me out of the picture, everything else is there. Hey, we're there. Drum roll. Here are the honorables. I call them the honorables. The honorable mentions. Not in any particular order. There they are. David Hall. Ray Munns. And John Wright. Very fine images. Very fine images. And one more drum roll. Tom, you don't have to change it. I like it. It's good. Notable number 3. Or as you guys say, 3rd place. Karen, I want to go visit that place. Very interesting. I put that as 2nd because of the dramatic way it represents what water does. And George, I had to pick this as number 1. I think this is an incredibly effective image, even without the theme of water, for all the reasons I already explained. And that's it, folks. Shall I end my sharing? There we go. I hope that was helpful. I hope that was
Very
helpful.
helpful. Fran, I appreciate you coming, and I feel very lucky or whatever to have you come and join us if this is your last show. I mean, this was great. So
This is definitely my last judging. I'm sorry I'm not there live, and I'm real proud of my timing.
yeah, you did great. Look at that. Couldn't have
Almost
asked for
8:30.
better.
But I want to
Very
thank you
good,
guys. There's a lot of really good images. Let me tell you, I had a tough time picking the honorable mentions and a tougher time picking the top 3. I had to sit back and say to myself, Fran, it's only a competition in a club. It's not the world coming to an end. But there are plenty of other images there that could have sat on the podium. A lot of good, strong images. Good work, folks.
Yeah,
You've done good.
pictures.
So thanks again.
guys.
I appreciate it.
So you'll share the deck with us?
Yes.
You share that with us?
I'll tell you though, even when I make it a PDF file, it's big. So am I able to put it in your Dropbox? Remember when you gave me those images? Did you give me those images from a Dropbox?
Right.
Google Drive.
Oh, Google Drive.
Mhm.
Okay. Is there a way for me to do that? Can you let me know how to do that? Can I do it? It's a big file.
Yeah, I mean, even if you compress it, if you save it as a compressed PDF.
Well, I'm not sure I know how to do that in my Apple, but I can figure it out.
Okay. We'll figure out a way
You
between
know,
me and David.
I'll
We'll
tell you,
figure
I'll
out.
tell you what else I could do. I could delete. You know how after I show the two with the description,
Mm-hmm.
and then after that I show both images,
Right.
I can delete those. And whoever needs to know, they'll still see the original and the change and my information below it. What do you think of that?
It might work. Yeah, that'd be fine.
Yeah.
I think so. I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
so.
absolutely.
That'll make it a lot smaller.
Yeah, gotcha.
Let me work it. Let me work it and get in touch with. Who should I get in touch with?
Just send an email to me and David. That'd be good.
Okay, that's what I'll do. All right, let me work on that next day or two.
Does anybody have any comments or questions?
The balloon.
Who did the balloon?
Yeah.
The abstract?
Water balloon.
Yeah. Oh, I forget that. I've got that in my Lightroom. Do you remember who did that? That was done by Tom Carroll.
Yeah, Tom.
He's in the room,
Oh,
isn't he?
he just
He was-
dropped.
Okay,
Yeah, he was on the
did
Zoom,
that.
but he dropped. Yep.
Very cool picture. Very cool
Can
picture.
can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Thank you so much for judging the contest. Also, really beautiful images. Really enjoyed the abstract images a lot. That was really amazing. Jaw dropping. I was just wondering, I know you just showed us that you were using Lightroom and you mentioned Adobe Lightroom earlier.
Yeah.
I was just wondering if you could talk at all about like your technical process that you went through to edit the photos. Do you have like an order?
Oh, I'll tell you. I let me interrupt you because I know you guys want to go home. I love to do this. The first time I did this process where I show changes to a photography club was your club. Before that, I was only going to groups that I knew that were some professionals and some more advanced photographers whose egos wouldn't be, like, hey, you changed my picture. How dare you? And so it was an experiment with your group, and I really appreciated that you took it. For the last couple of years, I've worried that some of you really hated it, but it works because I'm not stealing your images and I'm giving you my interpretation. And the most important thing to do is to give you an opportunity to think about maybe working on it differently, experimenting. My process, I bring the image in and I look at it and I do exactly that. I say, what do I think needs to be fixed? And I have to know the technical means to do that. That's all it is. Whether it needs a crop, whether it needs an effective vignette, whether it needs a color balance change or something like that. So I'm just working with the tools that I normally work with on my own images. Does that help? Does that answer the question?
Sure, yeah, I was just curious. Thank you so much for your editing and for talking about everything. That was a great presentation.
Thank
Yeah,
you. I really appreciate you guys. You're good.
I like the fact of just experiment, right? So you have these sliders for all these different settings. I like going to the extreme, then coming back, right?
That's the way I work too. I often go
Yeah.
to the extreme and then come back because you never know what you're going to see. A photograph isn't real. It's a photograph. You can do whatever you want to it. And photography is different than painting. Painting is additive. You start with a blank canvas and you're adding stuff. But photography is knowing what to leave out, knowing what to remove. It's a totally different process. I love it because I can't paint.
All right, guys. Anything else? Thank you. Appreciate it, friend.
Great. Thank you all. I appreciate it. I appreciate you guys. I'll be in touch about the PDF file.
All right, we'll do. We'll share with the club. All right, guys.
Very